as you can see, a new view. The lathe is now in front of me. I had intended to do a turning video today, but as a result of many suggestions, and thank you for that in the comments of my last video, when I was intending to move the lathe from its position that it's been in for about 5 years, to move it out from the wall and still leave enough room for my wife to get her car in. So anyway, this is what I've done, and to explain my reasoning behind the things that I've done and how I've overcome the wiring situation without any major, well, virtually no cost at all. I think apart from a bit of heaving and straining, and I'll also go into how I moved the lathe on my own very easily. Took a bit of time, but it was done without messing my back up. So I'll just go through what I've done, and a big thank you again to everybody that gave all the input into my last video with possible solutions to what I was intending to do. One of the common suggestions was just to have moved the lathe at 90 degrees, leaving the headstock effectively here and all the wiring and everything. That wasn't really what I wanted to do, because I wanted to get complete access around the lathe. So I've got access to the bench and all my supplies over here, and I can get to the grinder just by moving across a couple of steps. And one of the biggest advantages for me is being able to look out, if you like, without having to stare at the wall each time. You know, when you look up from doing what you're turning, you're looking at the wall. That was the other idea, but I think the main reason was to give me more flexibility while filming. And it meant that, it means now that I can do 99% of what I want to do from a tripod. The main goal was to be able to do this, leave enough room in the garage for my wife to get her car in, and also not to have any wires trailing on the floor, which could be a potential trip hazard. I know there are ways I could have cut into the concrete, I could have put cable covers over the top and so on, but I didn't like that idea, knowing that I'm a bit clumsy. I wanted to run them from the ceiling. Well, I'm no electrician, so I sat and thought about it, took on board quite a few things that people had suggested and what have you, and I came up with what I always term any solution I come up with as a Heath Robinson solution, but it works. It does up to now. So I'll go through what I did. The first thing, moving the lathe on my own, obviously I was thinking of getting a friend in to give me a hand, and I thought about it. I took the tailstock off and the banjo, and whichever end I wanted to lift, I moved the tailstock to the other end, so I have a heavy pivot point, and then literally with bent knees and straight back, walk it. And it's surprising how little weight there is, because all the weight's at that end. Move it a bit and then come back around, slide the headstock up to the other end and move this end. And that's what I did, and literally turned it around to its position now. So that was how I moved the lathe. So the lathe is sorted, now I've got to get power to it. So the lathe was hardwired into a switch over here, and I wanted to run it up over the top. I had various ideas. So this is temporary insofar as I haven't actually covered the cables. I mean, I'm aware they're there, and you know, they will have covers on them if this setup works, which I think it will do. So I cut the cable, ran what was left of that cable up the wall and across the top here. Then I immediately got a junction box and got some new cable and ran that around here. It goes across the roof struts here up to a strut here, which is just in front of the lathe. Now if I move this, you can see this arrangement here. Now all this is a very inexpensive, I think it cost me about £4.50. It's a waste pipe, plumber's waste pipe. So I cut a little notch out in that, screwed it to one of the beams, and then ran the cable down that so that it's covered and it's safe. You know, nothing can cut through the cable. and then ran it here. And then what I did, I got a fused extension socket and hot glued that to the lathe. If you ever do anything like that on a lathe, be very quick, because the steel is so cold, the hot glue goes off virtually instantaneously. It's almost like super glue. Anyway, I've done that, and that is very solid. Then connected that cable to the extension socket, just like wiring a plug basically, which then gave me power to the lathe, or to the lathe area, without any cable. Well, I've got 4 plugs on there, so I thought, right, okay. I moved the extractor to under the lathe. It's not a problem, doesn't get in my way, and that way then I can connect the power for that. So I've got the extractor and the lathe being powered from here, and the whole thing is still switched on and off by the main hardwired switch over there, which is great. There's no power to it at the moment. If I turn it on, then I've got my lathe on, I've got the extraction working, and a light, a magnetic light, one of my IKEA lights on the headstock. Okay, now this light, my main light that was on the bench before behind the lathe, what I've done there, I've screwed that to a piece of plywood going across 2 struts with 4 hefty screws, and I've run the power for that to another point over there behind the camera, where I got power to the air filtration system. So this works very well, and that gives me a good general light while I'm working, and then I've got this for any more light I should want at the back of a project. And if I'm hollowing and I want to see inside and I can't get low enough with this, then all I do is take that off the headstock, because it's got a magnet, and I can place that on the bedways anywhere. So that gives me a lot of flexibility. So as far as that's concerned, I'm very pleased with how it's turned out. As far as the extraction system is concerned, all I've done there, I've got a piece of timber, and I have attached that to another piece of timber which I've screwed to the beam, and by means of a locking lever I put an M10 bolt through, and that allows me then to move the to exactly where I want it. This bendy hose I've had since I started turning, and it is really, really flexible. Now I've attached a length of the original extractor hose by means of a series of thick cable ties, and then I'd originally covered that with gaffer tape, and I had to think about it. It didn't look very good, and it wasn't that solid, believe it or not. So I got some builder's PVC tape, which cost about, I don't know, £4.50, £5 for a big roll, and that is quite flexible, and it's almost like insulating tape that you use for insulating wiring, and that forms around the pipe and has made a very solid piece here. So I can move this to wherever I want, and the reason I've got it this way is because of the bendy pipe. I can move it right the way to the end of the lathe, and I've got extraction at point of producing the dust. So that's brilliant. And when I'm not using that, when I'm turning, I can just slide it away, and I curl it up this way, and I just slide it away, and it's out of the way. Obviously, because it's merely a bolt and a couple of washers onto wood, it's going to work loose every now and again. That's why I've got the locking lever. So if it gets a bit loose, I just give a bit of a tug on there, and it's not going to move anywhere. Absolutely brilliant. And I'll be honest with you, I don't foresee that I'm going to be changing that, because it works very well. One other thing I didn't mention was I just put a bit of hot glued a bit of plywood to the top of the extension socket, just to stop any excessive dust and chippings getting onto the plug sockets. and that seems to work pretty well as well. Not that I've done a lot of turning since I've done this, I must be honest, but I'm hoping to rectify that in the very, very near future. Really and truly, I'm extremely pleased with how it is. I've got easy access to everything, I've got no wires to trip over, and as I've said before, I've got access to everything, and I've got a nice outlook as well, which is great. Okay, that just about covers it. Before I go, I'll just zoom in a bit. I have a few more stickers. Elliot Kin from Sweden, I believe. Thanks for that, Elliot. I also got one from my old mate Scott McConnell. Scott McConnell's been following me for quite some time, and I appreciate that, Scott, and I think you've got mine as well, as you should have mine by now as well, Elliot. Thank you for that. And Brett Cunningham from Woodturning UK, a couple of stickers from Brett, and what I'll do is put the relevant links in the descriptions below to their social media or YouTube channels if they have them, and they'll go up on the board. Thank you very much indeed, lads, I appreciate that. And just before I go, don't forget Harrogate, either there or there, next month. I shall look forward to seeing those who attend, and look forward to seeing you on the Simon Hope stand. It's not long to go now. So, thank you very much indeed for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you very soon. Cheers now.